Out of the Dust, Spring, 1935. Heartsick. The hard part is, in spite of everything, if I had any boy court me, it'd be Mad Dog Craddock. But Mad Dog can have any girl. Why would he want me? I'm so restless. My father asked what's going on with me. I stormed up to my room, leaving him alone standing in the kitchen. If Ma was here, she would come up and listen. And then later, she would curl beside my father and assure him that everything was all right, and soothe him into his farmer's sleep. My father and we can't soothe each other. I'm too young, he's too old, and we don't know how to talk anymore, if we ever did. April 1935. Skin. My father got a raised spot on the side of his nose that was never there before and won't go away. And there's another on his cheek, and two more on his neck. And I wonder, why the heck is he fooling around? He knows what it is. His father had those spots too. April 1935. Regrets. I never go by Arley's anymore. Still, every week he comes to school and to teach, and sometimes I bump into Vera or Miller Rice or Mad Dog. They're always kind. They ask about my father. They ask how my hands are feeling. I cross my arms in front of me tight so my scars won't show. These days, Mad Dog looks at me, halfway between picking a fight and kindness. He walks with me a ways some afternoons, never says a word. He's quiet once the other girls go off. I've had enough of quiet men. I ought to keep clear of Mad Dog, but I don't. April 1935. Fire on the rails. I hate fire. Hate it. But the entire Oklahoma panhandle is so dry, everything is going up in flames. Everything too ready to ignite. Last week the school caught fire. Damage was light on account of it being caught early. Most kids joked about it the next day, but it terrified me. I could hardly go back into the building. And this week, 3 boxcars in the train yard burned to ash. Jim Goyne and Harry Kessler spotted the fire, and that was a miracle considering the fierceness of the dust storms at the time. The fire boys tore over, and they couldn't put the blaze out without water, and water is exactly what we didn't have. So they separated the burning cars and moved them down a siding away from any little thing that might catch if the flames hopped. It was all they talked about at school. The dust blew, they say. So you'd think if it would have smothered the fire out, but the flames, crazy in the wind, licked away at the wooden frames of the 3 boxcars until nothing remained but warped metal and twisted rails, scorched dirt, and charred tires. No one talks about fire right to my face. They can't forget how fire changed my life. But I hear them talking anyway. April 1935. The mail train. They promised through rain, heat, snow, and gloom, but they never said anything about dust. And so the mail got stuck for hours, for days, on the Santa Fe because mountains of dust had blown over the tracks, because blizzards of dust blocked the way. And all that time, as the dust beat down on the cars, a letter was waiting inside a mail bag. A letter from Aunt Ellis, my father's sister, written just to me, inviting me to live with her in Lubbock. I want to get out of here, but not to Aunt Ellis and not to Lubbock, Texas. My father didn't say much when I asked what I should do. Let's wait and see, he said. And what's that supposed to mean? April 1935. Migrants. We'll be back when the rain comes, they say, pulling away with all their own, straining the springs of their motor cars. Don't forget us. And so they go, fleeing the blowing dust, fleeing the fields of brown-tipped wheat, barely ankle-high and sparse as the hair on the dog's belly. We'll be back, they say, pulling away towards Texas, Arkansas, where they can rent a farm, pull in enough cash, maybe start again. We'll be back when it rains, they say, setting out with their bed springs and mattresses, their cook stoves and dishes, their kitchen tables, and their milk goats tied to their running boards, in rickety cages, setting out for California, where even though they say they'll come back, they just might stay if what they hear about the place is true. Don't forget us, they say. But there are so many leaving. How can I remember them all? April 1935. Blankets of black. On the first clear day, we staggered out of our caves of dust into sunlight, turning our faces to the big blue sky. On the second clear day, we believed the worst was over at last. We flocked outside, traded in town, going to stores and coming out, only to find the air still clear and gentle, grateful for each easy breath. On the third clear day, summer came in April, and the churches opened their arms to all comers, and all comers came. After church, folks headed for picnics, car trips. No one could stay inside. My father and I argued about the funeral of Grandma Lucas, who truly was no relation. We ended up going anyway, driving down the road in a procession to Texoma. 6 miles out of town, the air turned cold. Birds beat their wings everywhere you looked. Whole flocks dropping out of the sky, crowding in fence posts. I was sulking in the truck beside my father when heaven's shadow crept across the plains. A black cloud, big and silent as Montana, boiling on the horizon and barreling toward us. More birds tumbled from the sky, frantically keeping ahead of the dust. We watched as the storm swallowed the night. The sky turned from blue to black. Night descended in an instant, and the dust was on us. The wind screamed. The blowing dirt ran so thick I couldn't see the brim of my hat as we plugged from the truck fleeing. The dust swarmed like it had never swarmed before. My father groped for my hand, pulling me away from the truck. We ran, a blind pitching toward the shelter of a small house, almost invisible, our hands tight together, running toward the ghostly door, pounding on it with desperation. A woman opened her home to us, all of us, not just me and my father, but the entire funeral procession, and one after another, we tumbled inside, gasping, our lungs burning for want of air. All the lamps were lit against the dark. The house, dazed by dust, gazed weakly out. The walls shook in the howling wind. We helped tack up sheets on the windows and doors to keep the dust down. Cars and trucks, unable to go on, their ignitions shorted out by the static electricity, opened up and let out more strangers, who stumbled for shelter. One family came in, clutched together, their paw divining the path with a long wooden rod. If it hadn't been for the company, this storm would have broken us completely, broken us more thoroughly than the plow had broken the Oklahoma sod, more thoroughly than my burns had broken the ease of my hands. But for the sake of the crowd and the hospitality of the home that sheltered us, we held on and waited, sitting or standing, breathing through wet cloths. As the fog of dust filled the room and settled slowly over us. When it let up a bit, some went on to bury Grandma Lucas, but my father and I, we cleaned the thick layer of grime off the truck, pulled out of the procession, and headed on home, creeping slowly along the dust-mounded road. When we got back, we found the barn half covered in dunes. I couldn't tell which rise of dust was Ma and Franklin's grave. The front door hung open, blown in by the wind. Dust lay 2 feet deep in ripply waves across the parlor floor. Dust blanketed the cook stove, the icebox, the kitchen chairs, everything deep in dust. And the piano, buried in dust. While I started to shovel, my father went out to the barn. When he came back, and when I asked, he said the animals weren't good, and the tractor was dusted out. And I said, it's a wonder the truck got us home. I should have held my tongue. When he tried starting the truck again, it wouldn't turn over. April 1935. The visit. Mad Dog came by to see how we made out after the duster. He didn't come to court me. I didn't think he had. We visited more than an hour. The sky cleared enough to see Black Mesa. I showed him my father's pond. Mad Dog said he was going to Amarillo to sing on the radio, and if he sang good enough, there might they might give him a job there. You'd leave the farm? I asked. He nodded. You'd leave school? He shrugged. Mad Dog scooped a handful of dust like a boy in a sand pit. He said, I love this land, no matter what. I looked at his hands. They were scarless. Mad Dog stayed longer than he planned. He ran down the road back to his father's farm when he realized the time. Dust rose each place his foot fell, leaving a trace of him long after he'd gone. April 1935. Freak show. The fellow from Canada, James Kingsbury, photographer from the Toronto Sun, way up there in Ontario, the man who took the first pictures of the Dion quintuplets, left his homeland and came to Joyce City looking for some other piece of oddness, hoping to photograph the drought and the dust storms, and he did, with the help of Bill Rotterdall and Handy Poole, who took him to the sandiest farms and showed off the boniest cattle in the country. Mr. Kingsbury's pictures of the Dion babies got them famous, but it also got them taken from their mother and father and put on display like a freak show, like a tent full of two-headed calves. Now I'm wondering what will happen to us after he finishes taking pictures of our dust. April 1935. Help from Uncle Sam. The government is lending us money to keep the farm going, money to buy seed, feed loans for our cow, for our mule, for the chicken still alive, and the hog, as well as a little bit of feed for us. My father was worried about paying back because of what Ma had said, but Mrs. Love, the lady from FERA, assured him he didn't need to pay a single cent until the crops came in, and if the crops never came, then he wouldn't pay a thing. So my father said, okay, anything to keep going. He put the paperwork on the shelf beside Ma's book of poetry and the invitation from Aunt Ellis. He just keeps that invitation from her, glowering down on me from the shelf above the piano. April 1935. Let down. I was invited to graduation to play the piano. I couldn't play. It had been too long. My hands wouldn't work. I just sat on the piano bench staring at the keys. Everyone waited. When the silence went on so long, folks started to whisper. Arlie Wonderdale lowered his head, and Mrs. Freeland started to cry. I don't know. I let him down. I didn't cry. Too stubborn. I got up and walked off stage. I thought maybe if my father ever went to Doc Rice to do something with the spots on his skin, Doc could check my hands too, tell me what to do about them. But my father isn't going to Doc Rice, and now I think we're both turning to dust. May 1935. Hope. It started out as snow. Oh, big flakes floating softly, catching on my sweater, lacing the edges of my sleeves. Snow covered the dust, softened the fences, soothed the parched lips of the land. And then it changed, halfway between snow and rain, sleet, glazing the earth, until at last it slipped into rain, light as mist. It was the kindest kind of rain that fell. Soft and then a little heavier, helping along what had already fallen into the hard pan earth until it rained, steady as a good friend who walks beside you, not getting in your way, staying with you through a hard time. And because the rain came so patient and slow at first, and built up strength as the earth remembered how to yield instead of washing off, the water slid into the dying ground and softened its stubborn pride and eased it back toward life. And then, just when we thought it would end, after 3 such gentle days, the rain came slamming down, tons of it, soaking into the ready earth to get prime and greedy earth, and soaking deep. It kept coming, thunder booming, lightning kicking, dancing from the heavens down to the prairie, and my father dancing with it, dancing outside in the drenching night, with the gutters racing, with the earth puddled and pleased, with my father's near-finished pond filling. When the rain stopped, my father splashed out to the barn and spent 2 days and 2 nights cleaning dust out of his tractor until he got it running again. In the dark, headlights shining, he idled toward the freshened fields, certain the grass would grow again, certain the weeds would grow again, certain the wheat would grow again, too. May 1935. The rain's gift. The rain has brought back some grass, and the ranchers have put away the feed cake and sent their cattle out to graze. Joe D. LaFleur is singing in his saddle again. May 1935. Hope smothered. While I washed up dinner plates in the pan, the wind came from the west, bringing dust. I'd just stripped all of the gum tape from the windows. Now I've got dust all over the clean dishes. I can hardly make myself get started cleaning again. Mrs. Love is taking applications for boys to do CCC work. Any boy between 18 and 28 can join. I'm too young and the wrong sex. But what I wouldn't give to be working for the CCC somewhere far from here out of the dust. May 1935. Sunday afternoon at the Amarillo Hotel. Everybody gathered at the Joyce City Hardware and Furniture Company on Sunday to hear Mad Dog Craddock sing on WDAG from the Amarillo Hotel. They hooked up speakers, and the sweet sound of Mad Dog's voice filled the creaky aisles. Arlie Wonderdell was in Amarillo with Mad Dog singing and playing the piano, and the Black Mesa Boys were there too. I ached for not being there with them, but there is nothing more most folks in Joyce City wanted to do than spend a half an hour leaning on the counters, sitting on resting in chairs, staring at the hardware and the tableware, listening to hometown boys, making big-time music on the radio. They kept time in the aisles, hooting after each number, and when Mad Dog finished his last song, they sent the dust swirling, cheering and whooping, patting each other on the back as if they'd been featured on WDAG themselves. I tried cheering for Mad Dog with everyone else, but my throat felt like a trap had snapped down on it. That Mad Dog, he didn't have a thing to worry about. He sang good all right. He'll go far as he wants. May 1935. Baby. Funny thing about babies. Ma died having one. The Lindberghs said goodnight to one and lost it, and somebody last Saturday decided to give one away. Reverend Bingham says that Harley Madden was sweeping the dust out of church, shining things up for Sunday service, when he swept himself up to a package in the north front steps. He knelt, studying the parcel, and called to Reverend Bingham, who came right by and opened the package up. It held a living baby. Reverend Bingham took it to Doc Rice. Doc checked it, said it was fine, only small, less than a 5-pound sack of sugar, and a little cold from spending time on the north front steps. But Mrs. Bingham and the Reverend warmed the baby with blankets and sugar water and tender talk, and the whole of Joyce City came forward with gifts. I asked my father if we could adopt it, but he said we stood about as much chance of getting that baby as the wheat stood of growing, since we couldn't give the baby anything, not even a ma. Then he looked at me, sorry as dust, and to make up for it, he pulled out a box with the rest of clothes Ma had made for our new baby, and told me to drop them by the church if I wanted. I found the dimes Ma had been saving, my earnings from the piano, inside an envelope, in the box of baby Franklin's nighties. She had kept those dimes to send me to Panhandle A&M to study music. No point now. I sat at her piano a long time after I got back from the church, imagining a song for my little brother, buried in Ma's arms on a knoll overlooking the banks of the Beaver, imagining a song for the Lindbergh baby, stiff in the woods, imagining a song for this new baby, who would not be my father's son. May 1935. Old bones. Once dinosaurs roamed in Cimarron County, bones showing in the green shale, ribs the size of plow blades, hip bones that crank phones, and legs running like fence rails down to a giant foot. A chill shoots up my spine, imagining a dinosaur slogging out of an Oklahoma sea with turtles swimming around its legs. I can see it sunning itself on the swampy banks. Beyond it, a forest of ferns. It's almost easy to imagine, gazing out from our house at the dust-crushed fields, easy to imagine filling in all the emptiness with green, easy to imagine such a beast brushing an itchy lump against our barn. But all that remains of it is bone, broken and turned to stone, trapped in the hillside. This once upon a time real-life dinosaur who lived, who fed, and roamed like a ridiculous long-necked cow, and then fell down and died, I think for a moment of Joe D. LaFleur herding brontosaurus instead of cattle, and I smile. I tell my father, let's go to the site and watch the men chip away with ice picks. Let's see how they plaster the bones, please, before they ship the whole thing to Norman. I am thinking that a dinosaur is getting out of Joyce City 100 million years too late to appreciate the trip, and that I ought to get out before my own bones turn to stone. But I keep my thoughts to myself. My father thinks a while, rubbing the spot on his neck. He looks out the window, out across the field, toward the knoll where Ma and the baby lie. It's best to let the dead rest, he said, and we stay home. June 1935.